everyone. Welcome to All Things Indian Friendly Voices. The year that has gone by, 2020, has been really disastrous for many, not in one country or one society, but across the world. Millions have lost the jobs, billions have lost homes, and almost 2 million people have died across the world. I mean, as per the official figures that we receive from various governments. That the whole world came to standstill because of the pandemic, commonly known as coronavirus. Uh, Everybody, there's a hope. Everybody was hoping 2021 will be normal. We'll get back to normal, and we have some wonderful news that vaccination drive is going to be rolled out from 16th of January. So, but all of us have heard, all of us are using, but very few of us know much about what exactly this pandemic is and what corona is. We may read here and there in the internet, but still it's better to hear from the friends who know better than us, those who are in that field. So for to discuss all these things, vaccine, the pandemic, corona, all this, we have two wonderful but knowledgeable friends with us today. Yeah, Suresh, you please.
Yeah, thank you, Rajmohan. Yeah, let me introduce you to the two panelists for today. One is Dr. K. Mathan. Welcome to this session, Dr. Mathan. And the other is Dr. Vijay. Welcome, Vijay. Dr. Mathan has completed his MBBS in 2002. He worked as a TB control program officer between 2002 and 5 and later he was the WHO TB program consultant between 2005 and 6. Then he did a radiology post-graduation between 2007 and 10 and is currently the consultant radiologist at Pallava Scans of Chengalpattu. He's also the co-founder of the company called /DR, which is /doctor. That's a global health, and he's also part of the global health and humanitarian volunteer for Medicine Sans Frontier. He is currently an MPH epidemiology scholar at ICMR School of Public Health. That's ICMR National Institute of Epidemiology of Chennai. He's been doing that from 2019 till date. He's working at the intersection of epidemiology, public health, disease surveillance, and digital health technology. So as you can see, he is an epidemiologist, so that we get to know more about the epidemics, the pandemic from him. The other person in the panel today, Dr. Vijay, he's a well-known friend for all of us. You would have seen him earlier in our own telemedicine session that we did with him and Mr. Gokul. He had completed his MBBS in 1995 and later he did his radiology post-graduation and training and completed it in 2000. He has been a practicing radiologist and has worked in private sector hospitals. Initially, he was working in Coimbatore, and the last 15 years, he's been based out of Salem. So Dr. Vijay also knows a lot about the interior parts of the country and how medicines are given at these places, how the public health service works in these areas and interior areas. So given these two people, we are sure that we can look at various aspects of this pandemic. What is the pandemic? We'll get a clear idea, and also maybe we'll get an idea of how the vaccine rollout could happen and how people can get vaccinated. So to start the session, let me give this back to Rajmohan. So over to you, Rajmohan.
Yeah, thanks, Suresh. Dr. Madan, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Dr. Vijay. So before we start anything, normally I know there's always some fascinating history about naming the planets, naming the cyclones, naming the viruses. They tend to choose female names. Is Corona a feminine name?
No, sir. It's not a
No. Oh
feminine
my
name.
God. So many people are going to be disappointed with that. So basically, what I said was not now a year ago when I tracked the etymology of Corona. It
Yeah.
says it's a crown on the head of a princess.
Yes.
So it must be a
Uh,
feminine. It must be a female species. So I mean,
Mhm.
it was named after the shape of that appearance of that virus, which had a crown-like appearance, or the appearance which resembles the corona of the sun,
okay,
like
Oh, okay,
sun
okay.
with its rays.
okay.
So that's what they went with while naming it.
Mhm.
And there was a consensus among the scientists who discovered different similar looking viruses at that point of time, and they decided to name it coronavirus.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. So we'll start the things. Basically, that we all have seen. We Indians have seen cholera, plague, smallpox, and all that. So, I mean, how different is this corona? Why it is a pandemic? What is a pandemic? And when these epidemics like cholera, they become pandemic. Dr. Mathan.
Yes, sir. So measuring any disease for that matter, when it occurs in a population, there are some diseases which always are omnipresent in at any point of time throughout the year. So those kind of diseases are called endemic diseases. They refer to there is a constant presence of these diseases in any given population or at any point of time. So if I say there is a cholera, it is not an epidemic. And if there is an unusual number of cases in a particular population, say it is a town or it's a village, or even if it is a big city like Chennai, if it is an unusually increased number of cases happening in a defined population, it is called as an epidemic or a local outbreak. When such an epidemic goes beyond these boundaries, involves multiple countries, multiple continents, and involves multiple uh, number of people, it involves huge population. When we take the scale bigger, then it is referred to as a pandemic. So this is the whole framework. As long as any disease which has a normal presence, almost like a regular presence all through the year, it is called as an endemic disease. It's there. We don't need to worry much because it comes and goes, and always there are some people coming with common cold. That's an endemic disease. Or even we can say some cases of some areas of India, there is always a presence of malaria. So those areas are called endemic for malaria. But if there is an unusually increased number of cases, then we call it as an epidemic. Epidemic is defined by a local area. When that area definition is breached and it goes beyond boundaries, then we call it as a pandemic. But the word pandemic, even though there is a framework to call any disease as a pandemic, it has to go through some certain stages.
Mhm.
So only the Director General of the WHO is authorized to name any disease as a pandemic. So there is the definition of a pandemic is constructed in a way, but it has to be qualified to be called as a pandemic through a process. There is a process.
Mhm.
The WHO Director General calls the technical committee and various stakeholders. Then they discuss any particular disease condition and the present state of the spread across many continents. And then when the committee votes or decides that such a disease can be called as a pandemic, only then the Director General is authorized to call any disease as a pandemic disease. If you recall, this present coronavirus or a COVID-19 pandemic had its onset as a small outbreak in somewhere in China. It started as a small cluster of diseases. I use the word cluster because there is an unusual uh, disease which is notified. There is a number of people who are localized to a small area within a uh, word cluster. So then the number significantly increased in the particular city, and then it escalated to a higher level. Before the WHO called this COVID-19 as a pandemic, there was an interim step. There a step called the WHO calling this COVID-19 as a public health emergency of international concern. It's called a PHEIC. So that was the first step where the WHO alerted all member states saying that this COVID-19 is a disease which is now localized within the realms of some parts of China, some parts of Hong Kong, South Korea, Thailand, and some parts in Asia. But it has the propensity, the potential to grow beyond this, and it should be addressed as a public health emergency of international concern. That's the first step before they called it as a pandemic.
Okay.
If you recall, in the last 10 years, starting from 2009, the present COVID-19 is the sixth time a disease has been notified as a public health emergency of international concern. Whereas as a pandemic, this is the second pandemic after the pandemic influenza that we had in 2009.
Okay. So, Dr. Vijay, that I have a doubt. If the same virus, how does it travel? Can this virus travel from China to Africa and all that? Or the virus is already there? Like any common man will have the same doubt.
Okay. I'll just qualify my answers with a disclaimer before I start, saying that, see, I am a radiologist. And of course, I've been a radiologist for 21 years now. And I've been watching what has been happening in India for 2 decades. But it does not qualify me to talk authoritatively about infectious diseases and these kind of spreading contagious diseases. Mathan is the one who's qualified to do that, who's going to be talking to us. But I'm going to give you an informed opinion. Yeah. I'll just qualify my answers as somebody who knows medicine, who knows the practice of medicine in this country, and who's giving you a qualified opinion on that. Okay, so take my words with that kind of a disclaimer. Now, to come to Mr. Rajmohan's question of whether these are viruses which are traveling. Again, Mathan is going to give you much more information about this. But see, the coronavirus is a virus which is very common as a respiratory virus. Respiratory in the sense which affects the breathing tract, the upper respiratory system, which is your nose and your airway, upper airway, up to the voice box. And anything below the voice box down to the main airways going into your lungs, that is called the lower airways. So these viruses can affect either of your, either part of your airways, the upper respiratory airways or the lower respiratory tract is what the medical term is. So viral infections can be upper respiratory or lower respiratory. The upper respiratory viruses are the ones which we know commonly as the common cold viruses. You know, all of you know, I mean, I'm sure both you and Suresh know the term that for a virus, for a cold, if you take medicines, it's 1 week. If you don't take medicines, it's 7 days. Correct. You know, it's a self-limiting viral infection. So most common colds are viral infections, which are upper respiratory infections, which affect your nose and your upper airways. And when they are self-limiting and you get a cough, cold, not even a cold, nasal block, you know, running nose, all that, maybe a mild fever, and it subsides in a specified period of time. There are a few viruses which can affect your lungs, which can go into the lower. Okay, so this coronaviruses are a group of viruses or a family of viruses which are prone to affect your respiratory tract. It can be upper respiratory, it can progress on to lower respiratory and cause influenza or flu. And then in a susceptible population, they can become very dangerous. They can endanger your life also. So this is the natural history of that disease, of what coronaviruses can do for you. Now, whether they can travel, no, the actual point is these are endemic viruses all over the world. Coronaviruses are there all over the world in all places, but there do occur specific strains. It is in the natural history of viruses to evolve into different strains. Again, I'm sure Madan will be able to give us more insight into that. I'm sure you're going to ask us more questions on that. But I'll just put it in here as a teaser here, that coronaviruses or these kind of cold viruses or influenza viruses can evolve into something bigger, and they can keep changing their nature to become more infective or more deadly, and they can spread and they can become more what can we say, more transmissible. They can spread more easily. All these are natural histories of their life cycle. So this is how it is. It's not that they are specified locally to only this location. They can only occur here. They can only occur here. It's not like that. They can occur anywhere in the world. Some of them have the propensity to become more transmissible. That's it.
Ours is a planet of viruses. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
Ours,
let me
let me just interrupt and say ours is a planet of microbes, and we are the people who are intruding into the microbes. Okay, there are trillions and trillions of microbes, and there are a few billion human beings who are intruding into their world.
Correct.
In fact,
No, that's right. Yeah. Now,
sorry.
I have a couple of questions to Madan. One, of course, is that from a practical aspect, when who declares this as a pandemic or as a public health emergency, is there a standard procedure that the countries have to follow? As what happens when they declare it as a pandemic? That's the first question as a follow-up to the first answer. And the second question of mine was as a follow-up to what Dr. Vijay said. That is, virus seems to have this action on your upper respiratory part or a lower respiratory tract and all that. And now we are seeing the virus evolving, right? That is, they're saying there's a South Korean strain, the UK strain has now become very popular. So 5-6 strains, a Japan strain I heard a day or two back. So what are these strains? What do you mean by these strains? What is the viral action? What happens? And what are these strains? So basically, the whole idea of how the virus attacks us and how it evolves is what.
Yeah, before Dr. Madan, that you may remember how much of abuse, trolling happened before this Tedros fellow came and announced. And all the Americans were raging against him. This man should be banned from Twitter. And he has taken 3 months to declare what kind of, they have tie-up with China. And I mean, so many things. You may remember that. Yeah.
Yes. So, before the WHO takes stock of the situation, and then, as I said, there is a process involved. So, as the first step of identifying a cluster, and then investigating that particular cluster and trying to decipher how this cluster originated and what is the real magnitude of this cluster. Like magnitude in the sense, how many people are affected, how many people are in hospital, how many people are symptomatic, how many people are severely infected or severely diseased, how many people need ICU admission, how many people are actually dead because of this cluster, has to be put in context. Because this whole exercise, what we call as an outbreak investigation, has to be dealt as a scientific inquiry into any cluster for that matter. So that happened in China. The initial cluster was actually investigated, but the entire gamut of findings was not initially shared with us. That's the reason why many queries are being raised about how the whole thing panned out. But as an international agency and as a regulatory agency and a guiding agency for many countries, WHO took this as with due process. That's how I see from my angle, because when you are handling multiple nations with different ideologies, with different backgrounds, with different stakeholders, you need to take them into stride and then work with them rather than work against them or work in in an asynchronous manner. So that is what I think WHO tried with the initial set of patients, initial set of clusters, and the initial scenario as it unfolded. But as soon as they identified there was a novel virus involved, I think WHO notified it to all member countries, including the United States and most of the countries. They notified it. If I recall well, within the first 15 days of the reporting of the first cluster in Wuhan, the entire member countries were alerted to the existence of such a cluster and a novel virus, and the virus itself was identified, named, and even cultured by that point. And China readily shared the entire viral culture and genome sequence as well in the first 15 days. That the alertness and the swiftness of the action from the Chinese authorities, and they were readily sharing all these details with us, which actually mattered, because today we have a vaccine because that initial genome sequences happened at the initial stage of the cluster itself. So that matters at the broader picture, if you look at the broader picture. And then as situation progressed, WHO kept on analyzing the situation, and they did a detailed risk assessment periodically. As I said, the first step before alerting most of the member countries, after they alerted most of the member countries that there is a potential novel virus that we are encountering and it has the potential to spread beyond boundaries, they named the present COVID-19 disease and the virus for all future references. Naming itself happened. And then they went on and then they declared the COVID-19 cluster or the disease itself as a public health emergency. When they declare any disease as a public health emergency, there is a standard set of response to any public health emergency. That kind of a response, there is a plan for such a response. Each member country is supposed to take up that plan. This plan is actually based on a broader framework called Pandemic Influenza Plan. This Pandemic Influenza Plan is a framework of activities that all WHO member countries, they are mandatory. They have to do it as a mandatory exercise because they are all bound by international health regulation, which comes under the ambit of WHO and the UN Charter. So all member countries of the UN and the WHO are supposed to abide by international health regulations, whereas any disease which is sanctioned as a public health emergency by the WHO, all member countries are supposed to do certain response programs and plans, and they have to put those into practice in their respective sovereign territories. So India also has a pandemic influenza plan since way back in 2009, and then we even updated it just recently in 2019 November. So we were in that stage of our preparations actually, and then suddenly out of the blue this whole thing happened. So this is a process. There is a process involved before any disease is called as a pandemic or named as a pandemic. So that's the first part of the question that I wanted to answer. The second part is, see, viruses are very simple organisms. I don't know whether if we can even call them as organisms, because they are non-living things basically. They have only two parts. There is a small genetic material. It can be either RNA or the DNA, and there is a envelope, which envelopes it, which covers it. And there are some particles which sits on top of this envelope. These particles are things which sits on top of this envelope, is the point of contact for this virus to any part of our body, whether they enter our body through any ports of entry. Number one, skin. Number two, through blood or any other entry mode. Number three is the most common mode of entry is the respiratory route. Number four is enteric route, which is like through oral means. When we eat, we also may ingest a lot of viruses along with it, or through when we drink something. So these are the more common modes of entry. So whenever any virus enters our body, it has to interact with the cellular mechanism existing within the body. So it has to first attach itself to the particular organ. So the coronavirus has a spike protein which sits on top of the envelope, and this spike protein enables this coronavirus or the COVID-19 virus to attach itself to our respiratory tract. That makes this particular virus more capable to actually cause the respiratory disease, because it attaches itself to a part which belongs to a respiratory tract. That is why we call this as a respiratory virus, and that is why it infects the lungs. If the coronavirus, by chance, through natural selection, happens to have a gut-related spike protein, it would have caused something like a normal diarrhea, and we wouldn't be worrying too much about this COVID-19 virus, or we wouldn't even bother to name it as a virus at all, because it would have caused some diarrhea and it would have gone along with that. But since this had this particular protein which manages itself to attach itself to a respiratory tract, and it has the propensity in certain high-risk individuals to cause an advanced disease or a severe disease, severe form of the disease, which ultimately could lead to death. That is why we are actually talking about this whole virus. Right? This is what we called as a pathogenesis of any particular disease, and this is the root cause of why this virus is a virus of concern.
So again, Mathan, just to,
shall I just okay finish?
I just wanted to say that we were also talking about what is a new strain. What does that mean?
Yes. Yes. So as part of any virus, any organism, as part of natural selection, will try to survive in all sorts of environment. This virus, which happens to be novel, when we see again why this virus is called a novel virus, because this is a new type of virus which was never sequenced ever on planet Earth ever before by anywhere in the world. That is why we called it as a novel virus. Novel is just a word which we try to replace for the new virus. That's it. So now any virus, so the virus itself is new, and it is encountering human population for the first time. So the original hypothesis is it came from the animal population. So it encountered the human population for the first time. So, and it is causing some disease. And now the human response to this virus is also happening in many levels. For that matter, for example, if the same virus is has encountered all four of us, the way my body and my immunity responds to that virus is completely different from all the other three, because each and every human body responds to any external agent in its unique way. So now what happens is every virus will try to thrive within that environment. To thrive, it has to make certain changes to itself when it multiplies, because the virus entering is not just one random virus. As soon as it enters, it goes into the body, attaches itself to the respiratory tract, and that's not the end of the story. It infiltrates into the cell and it start reproducing without any boundaries. Start reproducing in millions. Within 2 or 3 generations, you see an exponential growth, explosive growth within the body. And during this period, the body is trying to fight this replication. To escape from this fight or the fight back, the virus itself makes a change in itself, within itself. That is the reason why we encounter certain variants. So all these variants are a form of evolutionary mutation or a genetic mutation which happens within the viral genome to make itself more thriving within that environment. Because for the virus, we are a foreign environment. It was not supposed to thrive within that, but it is fighting the defense mechanisms and tries to stay alive and replicate. That is the reason for the variants. And each variant, see, there are such mutations are in millions. Even if we take the current COVID-19 virus, or the SARS-CoV-2 virus, as it's supposed to be called, there are many antigenic variants. But the problem is, if the variant, where the variation has happened, or where is the mutation happened? If it happens in some non-descriptable part of the whole genome, which is of totally no consequences to the actual disease, it is not of worry to us. But if it involves the spike protein through which it actually gets attached to the respiratory tract and making that spike protein more chances of getting itself attached to the respiratory tract, making it more sticky.
Effective, yeah.
Making it more sticky. Then its effect or its chances of getting infected is multiplied in as many terms. So if it involves certain pieces of the virus, which actually makes the virus itself more pathogenic or more disease causing, then it matters to us. And it also matters to us because the reason why we study the characteristics of the virus, the parts of the virus, and we identified which part of the virus actually matters in its overall pathogenic capability is because we also plan to develop a vaccine. Because we want to hit the virus where it hurts. So for example, for the COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus, we want to attack the spike protein because that is where the whole problem starts. And we want to replace the spike protein genome or the part of the genome which transcripts for the spike protein. That's the whole idea of this mRNA, messenger RNA vaccine by Pfizer and Moderna. So we should understand each and every variant. We should understand the whole viral genome and what leads to what, even to characterize how it affects transmissibility, how it affects the pathogenicity, how it affects the disease manifestation, how it affects our vaccine development. So the whole gamut of our understanding will change based on the new variants.
Okay. Yeah, I think Vijay wanted to say something.
No, actually, I want to say a lot. No, before I say this, see, I have noted down 6 or 7 points where I wanted to comment on what Mathan said. But before I go into that, let me just place on record. This is my second time with you people, with Rajmohan and Suresh, with in this particular podcast of conversations with friends. Right? I would like to place on record my appreciation for the kind of preparation that both Rajmohan and Suresh do for each conversation. You guys have been doing this from the beginning of late July or last August.
Yeah,
and I've listened to almost all of them, but many of the topics are beyond my understanding. They're overhead transmission. It goes over my head. So I don't pay attention to that. But the kind of preparation that you two put into each conversation is amazing.
Thank
Just
you.
for the audience's note, we received a 2-page note of the kind of questions that we can expect, the kind of topics that we are supposed to cover in this conversation from both of them, and we have successfully stuck to that so far. But now, see, the expert is Mathan. There is no question in that. Okay. Again, I would like to reiterate: the expert here is epidemiologist Mathan, and I am the
I'm
and
sorry.
I am the
Madan is a friend. You are a friend. It's a conversation.
no. In my opinion, he's the expert in this topic.
Correct, correct.
As a person who studies diseases.
So essentially,
as a
what
person-
Vijay is saying is now we are 3 against 1 now. Vijay
Yeah,
is
yeah,
part of
exactly.
us.
No, I'm just going to play a devil's advocate. I'll go from reverse order.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, this is a politically charged statement. It's a politically charged statement. I know what I'm saying, and I'm still saying it. See, the Chinese knew that they had a novel virus, or they had a new kind of viral infection, or they had a new kind of febrile illness in their Hubei province by somewhere around December of 2019.
Yeah.
Okay. Our understanding now from all the other news reports and the thing is, it started somewhere in September, mid-September. But at least it became evident by November, and the government, the provincial government in that, I won't even accuse the entire Chinese government. I'll say the provincial government of that region knew that there was something wrong by mid-December. Okay. Then the central Chinese government came to know about it by mid-January. If I recollect correctly, January 10th or 11th was the first time that the Chinese government acknowledged that they had a problem. They had a novel coronavirus infection. This is the time that they acknowledged. This was mid-January, somewhere immediate, exactly one year ago. Okay, somewhere around 10th of January 2020 is when. But it took the WHO to declare this as a pandemic. The WHO declared this as a pandemic on March 11th of 2020.
Yes.
It took 60 days.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
From the time the Chinese government acknowledges this thing, Mathan already said that they had already, the WHO had declared this as a PHEIC, a public health emergency of international concern. That happened sometime in the end of January or the beginning of February. But the WHO pussyfooted around this for a long time. Okay. I don't expect you to comment on this, Mathan. Don't worry, to keep quiet. I will do the accusations.
No, a lot of supporters. You have a lot of supporters on Twitter.
I'm not being nationalistic. I'm not being an anti-China fellow by saying this.
Yeah.
I'm not being pro-Trump or pro-Modi in saying this, but this is the truth.
Yeah.
They absolutely delayed the declaration of a pandemic by an inordinately long time. In that time, international flights could have been stopped, quarantine could have been established much earlier, and this kind of international spread would have been avoided, could have been avoided. We never know. We don't know now. It is all chickens out of the coop. So this is one thing. That is one point that I wanted to highlight first. The second one was, this is not the first time that the WHO is declaring a public health emergency of international concern. The last time that they did this was during the Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone and this thing. Okay, that was the even more scary thing. You see, Ebola has a mortality rate of 40-50%. You get it, you die. There is no treatment. Actually speaking, there is no treatment for corona also. We're talking about only the reason why Mathan was specifically talking about vaccination, and he was not talking about antiviral treatment, is because there is no treatment. Okay, there is only prevention. There is only prevention. The same as for Ebola. The only problem is Ebola is more deadly. Its mortality rate is high, so you're scared. And the media scared you enough. There are enough movies about Ebola, and there are enough documentaries about Ebola that you're scared already. Now, this is the time when we are starting to get scared about corona. Maybe 2 years down the line, when people are talking about the death rate in Italy, the death rate in Spain, the current death rate in USA, then we will have the same kind of awareness in popular media about corona. as what we have about Ebola and all. Okay,
SARS,
that's
I
the
think SARS and Ebola
see.
were
SARS is the same. It's the same virus.
Oh,
It
okay.
is the same virus. That
Okay.
was SARS-CoV-1. This is SARS-CoV-2.
Oh,
SARS,
okay, okay, okay.
which we saw 15, 16 years ago, 2002, 3, is the
Correct.
same virus. This
Okay.
is a different variation of that virus. That is why it is called SARS-CoV-2. That was
Oh, okay.
SARS-CoV. That was SARS-CoV. That's all. That
Correct,
we
correct.
now name it as retrospectively. We name it as SARS-CoV-1.
Okay.
Okay. Now this is SARS-CoV-2. Now the second point, the next point is. Mathan said WHO has guidelines which countries which are part of the WHO mandate are supposed to mandatory follow. Unfortunately, these are like our directive principles of our constitution. These are guidelines. These are not enforceable. You understand? The WHO does not have the teeth to enforce this in any country.
That's true.
Even what we call an underdeveloped sub-Saharan republic can stand up to the WHO and say, "Who the hell are you to tell me to do this?" You understand? Forget about big countries like USA or USSR or Russia or India or China. We just don't have to bother about what these guys are saying. That's the actual truth. They are giving you guidelines. We don't have to follow them. That's the other point. Then the next point was about antivirus and vaccines. I already said. He specifically said hit it where it hurts. See, to hit it where it hurts, you have to hit it in its replication. You have to hit the virus. You have to hit the viral protein. Where you have to viral particle or microorganism, whatever you call it. You don't want to call it a microorganism. You have to hit the virus and stop it from reproducing inside your body.
But once it is reproduced, you can't really do anything.
That is what the anti-HIV, antiretroviral drugs and all are doing. For HIV, there are antiretroviral drugs which are effective. They stop the virus from replicating. And for corona, for COVID virus, there is no such weapon which will stop the virus in its tracks. You can only have a protective immunization in the form of a vaccine. So that's another point.
So just let me understand this, Dr. Vijay, because I think a lot of viewers will also have this question. So when you say vaccine is not what do you call it?
There is no medication. There is no antiviral drug.
Exactly.
Vaccine is effective.
Yeah. So what I am trying to understand, or at least I think the viewers, I just want to be clear, is that here what we are saying is if the virus is not inside you and it is entering you now, the vaccine is already there, it will ensure that the virus doesn't hurt you. But once the virus is inside you and has started replicating, at that time, there is no drug which will destroy the virus. Is that a very layman's term?
Yeah. That's actually the very, very good interpretation of the current scenario.
As of today, we do not have any antiviral drug or any antiviral agent which can actually stop coronavirus after
once it has entered.
Entered and the starts multiplying. So that is that with regards to antiviral agents.
One second, Mathan, let me just finish my last point.
Yes.
We were talking about variations and mutations. Now you are talking about viral particle which is nano in its nano sizes. Okay, you're talking about a DNA particle or an RNA particle, or it's a nucleic acid. It's basically a genetic material which is getting into your body and replicating. Now, the very nature of DNA or RNA replication is that every replication there can be a change in every replication. Okay, this is not like an amoeba which is dividing. One amoeba divides into two, another goes into 4, and then that becomes 8, 16. It is not like that. This is one virus multiplying or replicating into hundreds or thousands of particles. Those hundreds of thousands, each one replicating into hundreds of thousands till they burst out of that cell because they lose the nutrition to continue replicating. They get into a cell, they start replicating. They use the cell's material. They use the cell's internal material as raw material to replicate. Then they burst out of the cell, get into the next cell, and then whatever is the neighboring cells. omnivorous. If I replicate, if one replicates into 10, then they get into 10 cells, and then the 10
Becomes
in the
100,
goes into
yeah.
100.
Okay.
This is what is called what is the logarithmic scale, or
Yeah,
you know, that kind of
e to the power.
the kind of scale that you cannot imagine where it will go and end.
Exponential scale.
Exponential scale. Sorry, that was the word that I was looking for. In this kind of exponential scale, at every point of division, there is a possibility for a change in the genetic code.
Okay.
At least one of the codes can change, and that one code can make a difference in whether the virus is more infective or less infective, or your vaccine is going to be effective or not. So every time a virus particle replicates, there is a mutation. This is something which is in the nature of the disease. You cannot control it.
Okay.
So when Mathan said that mutations are the nature of these viral replications, it is the truth.
Yeah.
It is just random. In 100 replications, if there are supposedly, let's say, we take a percentage, let's say 15% mutation is possible in 100. So when you're talking exponentially, 1 hour later, if the virus is going to replicate every 10 minutes, 1 hour later, you're going to have 6 orders of magnitude of
To the power 10,
replications.
yeah.
And yeah, exactly. So that is the kind of variation that you're looking at.
Okay. Yeah, Mathan wanted to
It's
say.
a huge challenge.
I just wanted to add something to what Vijay sir said right now. We were talking about strains, and we established the fact that all these things are grouped under the coronavirus thing. And they are also called as influenza virus because the kind of disease that most of these viruses cause fall into the bracket of viral influenzas. So we know there is a human influenza virus, and there is the constant presence of this human influenza viruses in most of the countries. So that's an established fact. And more so in Western countries, based on their seasonal variations, there is a season called flu season.
Correct. Yeah.
Our flu season is different from theirs, and our flu viral load is different from theirs.
Correct.
So I'll just take you back few years, and I'll tell you what happened after our first SARS encounter, SARS pandemic. So there is one random mutation which is happening in the human flu virus. At the same time, there is another flu virus, outbreak which is happening in the avian population. It's called as avian flu. Which is right now happening in our country, in at least 8 states. So one pig gets infected with both of these viruses. One pig somewhere in some country gets infected with both of these strains at the same time. And this pig goes through a mutation where 2 different strains of influenza viruses gets converted into a unique different strain within this one pig. And it gets transformed and it replicates to many, and somehow it breaks the animal-human barrier and infects a human population. That is what we saw as the swine flu. Not because
that's also what we saw as the MERS, Middle East.
That's
happened inside a camel rather than a pig. That's all.
Yes, that's another variation. So what started as a totally harmless strain of SARS, which in fact has vanished from Earth, because the SARS-1 did not go
beyond
into an endemic stage, because now there is no SARS anywhere. But what we are looking at today is many variants of the original SARS virus, which is present in most of the countries, in the form of swine flu, in the form of avian flu, in the form of SARS-CoV-2 right now.
Okay. And just a quick question before Rajmohan goes to the next one is, any idea, any work done on how this, what do you call, the animal to human jump happens? Because bats are supposed to be a reservoir of so many viruses, which never, even people encountering bats don't get it. But how does that jump happen from animal to humans?
This is a very fascinating topic, sir.
Okay, so we'll have a different session on that.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
See,
Too many, yeah.
I don't know how many Indians have heard of this Kaisnur forest disease.
Yes.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's an endemic disease in the Mysore and southern Karnataka parts. Kaisnur is somewhere there. I don't know where it is.
It's
But
near
this is a
there. It's where I did my
okay, Shimoga,
Shimoga, is it?
not South
Okay.
Karnataka actually.
It's in the
Okay,
Shimoga,
Okay.
near the Shimoga.
so see, that's basically one of the zoonotic viruses. Zoonotic. See, there are avian, zoonotic. All these are from either from birds or from animals. The virus makes a jump into the humans. Okay, the humans are not the definitive hosts. The hosts are animals, like how we say Nipah virus is from bats. The Kaisnur forest disease, the virus is from monkeys. Ebola is supposedly from monkeys. So, from the primary host, they make a jump into the what we are called the intermediary hosts, and this basically happens because of human-animal interaction. Either hunters go into the forest or wood gatherers go in. Somebody who goes into the forest encounters this animal, and from them they pick up the virus and they come and spread it in the human community. This is how it happens. So it can be through birds, it can be through bats, it can be through animals, it can be through domestic animals like pigs and all, like pigs and fowl, chickens and ducks and all. So that's the
Okay. Yeah, Rajmohan, I think
Basically,
you
that,
wanted to.
I mean, okay, we have discussed long enough. To me, anyway, what both of you are telling, but something is very frightening is when somebody like Dr. Fauci comes and tells, okay, we know what this variant found in United Kingdom is. Yeah, most probably these vaccines will work on them, but this what is found in South Africa, it is entirely new. We don't know anything about it. So it's a little scary when he says that, yeah, we can understand better what somebody like Dr. Fauci says, because both of you explain very well how the variants occur, etc. Now, because we are just discussing at the same point, so I want to mix up two questions into one. From what we know about Spanish pandemic influenza of 1918, and what we also read about at the time of Einstein. Okay, some good things happened, very good things happened because of these at least two big pandemics we know. Whatever the science, technology, Zoom in which we are talking, entire thing, the entire science evolved out of this man's complete isolation from society. Newton discovered basic laws of gravity, laws of motion, laws of optics, every damn thing that the entire science built a shoulder on which people like Einstein can stand, Tesla can stand and do more work. It happened because of that. And even in 1918 Spanish influenza, that it produced massive literature. Probably the writing and printing has come, and in the form of poetry, in the form of novels, stories across the world, that inspired somebody like Marcus to write Love in the Times of Cholera. Like even in India, we have Nirala, Ahmad Ali, and all that. So much of very fascinating stuff happened. I hope this pandemic also produces something path-breaking for humanity. But that apart, so my question is, how long a pandemic lasts? Because last time it was 4 years, even in Newton's time it was 4 years. Does it last for 4 years? And also, is it true that when WHO or somebody declares something pandemic strikes, it brings along new diseases, and also does it revive old diseases? Somebody said Ebola has come back again. Yeah, these two questions into one. How long it lasts, and does it revive old diseases and bring along new diseases? Yeah, we will start with Dr. Mathan.
So for the first question,
Yeah.
I would say any pandemic, how long will it last? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Okay,
Nobody
that's
knows.
good. That yeah.
Because it all depends on various factors. How well the virus, as we see, it is mutating, it is producing various strains. How many strains are actually consequential? how many strains are more influential, more transmissible, more pathogenic, and all these things are so fluid right now. We won't be able to put our fingers and say this whole pandemic will go off in certain days or months or years. So that's the first part. The second part is we have been through this pandemic for 1 year right now. Are we in a better position to handle this pandemic right now? So that's the kind of question that I would like to ask myself. From what we knew to what we have achieved in terms of the unknowns, answering the unknowns. So we have come a long way, and we have come a long way in understanding the virus itself. We have come a long way in understanding the disease process the virus has caused, and we have had many candidate antivirals. We have encored all possible antiviral agents that we had in our repertoire. We tested them in multiple scenarios, and we found that these things are not working. This itself is a significant scientific inquiry into this whole problem. And I'll come to the vaccine also, because this vaccines that we have today didn't come out of thin air. People are raising questions about how did we even manage to come out with a vaccine within 1 year. People think all the things that happened or which led to this vaccines happened during the last 1 year. No, this whole vaccine discovery and this whole vaccine process was kicked back way back. In fact, I'd like to point out the fact that the WHO created a R&D blueprint to create a platform of diseases which needs to be rigorously researched on. They created a platform approach to the vaccine discovery itself. Way back in 2008, they identified 10 important public health diseases that needs to be rigorously researched upon. And what they created was, they created an approach to create some kind of a common benchmark of vaccine delivery or vaccine discovery. So whatever has happened during this pandemic with regards to COVID-19 vaccines they have leveraged every possible technology which was discovered through the common platform technologies. So the mRNA technology is one such technology which emerged through that platform. We did not discover this whole mRNA thing just because we had a COVID-19 pandemic. We had this waiting in our wings. We just immediately we wanted to look whether this technology will be the best apt technology for a pandemic of this magnitude. And we started working on that as soon as we had the genome which was sequenced fully. So that's the whole paradigm of vaccine development has changed during this pandemic. And that's why we were able to come up with a candidate vaccine as soon as in 6 months. And then we were able to test it in multiple scenarios and come out with a regulatory approval, which should actually stand the test of multiple regulatory agencies across the world. And if you see the kind of the spectrum of vaccines which are available to us today, it's not just the newer technologies, which is the mRNA based. The vaccines which are from India, they fall back on the traditional approaches of vaccine development. As we have done in rotavirus, the same approach has taken over, and we still managed to deliver something on the international platform within a year. All this is because we are standing on the shoulders of people who have walked down this road before, and that is why we were able to do some kind of work with regards to vaccine development. So there are, for all the vaccine naysayers or anti-vaxxers or for the people who are still hesitant to take vaccines, I would like to say that there is a lot of rigorous scientific endeavor that has gone into this whole vaccine development. And there are some newer technologies as well as good old time-tested approaches to vaccine development, which has gone into this whole platform.
Okay. Second part of the question. So whether does it bring along new diseases and revive old dead diseases?
No, sir, not in the strict sense. But what it unearths is the problem. See, when as a country, and if we see most of the people who succumb to this disease happens to be people with some other comorbid conditions, such as diabetic, hypertension, or any other comorbid conditions which make them vulnerable, which make them part of a high-risk group. So we were neglecting these people in terms of our approach to them as a public health problem. We knew always that non-communicable diseases like hypertension and diabetes is going to haunt us for a long time, because these are not like infectious diseases which comes and goes. These are diseases which is going to be there. Someone is having a diabetic state, or someone is in a hypertension, is diagnosed as an hypertensive. He's going to be labeled as an hypertensive, and he has to take all the measures that is mandated as part of the management of hypertension. So we need to have a more rigorous approach towards them, because this is not the last pandemic that we are now going to see.
Yeah,
there may be another one. If I from first part of our conversation, I said in the last 10 years, the WHO has reported the 6th public health emergency of international concern. So we are already on the clock. So there is one public health emergency notified by WHO every 20 months. We have already crossed 12 months.
So let me put it this way. Dr. Mathan is an optimist. He's very sure. He's very optimistic.
I belong to the prepare for the worst club.
Yeah.
He's just being, he's scaring you without scaring you. That's all. Now there are a couple of things that I wanted to just comment on, based on what he was talking about. See, vaccines, like he said, vaccines are nothing new. Okay. Edward Jenner discovered vaccines in the end of the 18th century, 1790s somewhere. 1790s, that is when the first vaccine against smallpox was discovered by Edward Jenner. You can say that was an accidental discovery, because smallpox is a viral disease. He did not even know what the hell caused the disease. You know, he had no idea what caused the disease, but he knew what could prevent it. I mean, at least he could experiment with something that could prevent it, and he found it out. This is 200 years old. And just to poke at my my usual poking place, the commonest alternative medicine that you're talking about is homeopathy. Okay, Samuel Hahnemann proposed homeopathy 50 years after Edward Jenner discovered a vaccine. Please remember that. Consider that. When scientific medicine had already found a disease, prevention for something that was not even known what was causing it, somebody else came 50 years later and proposed some new theory about what is the disease and what is the thing. So we are living in a world where pseudoscience holds sway, because that is much more attractive to people. No pseudoscientist is going to come here, sit here on the panel. You are welcome to call the next session. You're welcome to call any other I am not even going to call them pseudoscientists. I'm going to call them alternative medical practitioners. You call a panel of alternative medical practitioners and you ask them the same questions that you asked Mathan, and he was unapologetically a pessimist. He said the WHO is looking forward to telling you which is the next pandemic.
They already
no
told.
Alternative medicine fellow will tell you that.
They already
will
told
tell you that. No, they will tell you if you follow our way, you will escape the next pandemic, is what they will say. See, this is the kind of world that we are living in. Unfortunately,
paradox in the sense that this is the world where the transmission of news can happen so fast. Unfortunately, the transmission of fake news happens faster.
Now, I will no, because you brought up fake news, not even fake news.
Yeah, I understand.
How a narrative is formed, multiple times during his introduction of the topic and how he framed the question. Rajmohan sir said Spanish flu, Spanish flu, Spanish flu.
Yeah.
Now, I will put it to you that this is not the Spanish flu, this is an American flu.
Okay, yeah.
You know why it's called the Spanish flu? Because bloody Spain was the only country which was reporting news in those years. In the war years, because Spain was the only neutral country and they were reporting news, they got blamed with the flu.
Yeah, like
but the flu originated in southern US. The flu originated in the southern US and went to the First World War. So, no, but see, this is how false narratives are formed.
Correct.
This
now,
is how,
if you see the UK guys, they are saying the same thing, that
Chinese
we
virus.
discovered the strain, and now you say that we are causing the strain. So,
Okay, right. Yeah, Suresh.
No. See, nothing. Not going politically, but you see how the narrative is framed of anything, especially something that affects so many people. Obviously, see, it is inconceivable. It is inconceivable that 2 million Americans have already died. Right.
Okay.
And the projected figures are the deaths in America, the US are not going to stop till it reaches 500,000.
Yeah.
You're already nearing 300,000.
No, not 300,000. It's 400. 385
something. 385 something. Okay. So you're definitely going to, by the time the winter is over, you're definitely going to cross 400,000. You're going to cross 500,000. But this is nothing compared to what the biggest pandemics are. Now, if you say Black Death, the plague, 13th, 14th century, the number of deaths were 50 million people. Okay, that is the estimated deaths, which the history books tell you. We are nowhere near that. Worldwide, we are not even 2 million deaths. So, in historical terms, this is a pandemic which has been handled very well by humanity. Only the most vulnerable are dying. And historically speaking, there is no comparison to how fast we have come up with a vaccine. Now, whatever else you can blame the Chinese on. I could have said that they took 2 months to declare their their endemic, and then the WHO took 2 more months to declare it as a pandemic. Whatever said, from the time it became known as a worldwide problem which could affect the world, within weeks we had a genome. We had the entire viral genome. And that is the reason why we have so many vaccine candidates. I think there are about 200 vaccine candidates. Mathan, am I right?
200, sir.
154 or the last count I said was at least 160.
Should be...
But approved itself is 4 or 5, right? Across the world?
Yeah. No, there are at least 160 vaccine candidates.
Oh, okay.
Which is just not possible if you don't know what you're dealing with.
Around 100 vaccine candidates, only 3 are approved.
Okay.
One vaccine candidate has been abandoned.
Oh, okay.
Now, because Suresh, I remembered you asking about vaccines. We can cover that also if you want to. Mathan is the right person.
Yeah. Okay. So the idea was like this, Mathan. They see 2 things. I think again, maybe because of the lack of time, I'll probably ask what Rajmohan was later supposed to ask you also into one. Is that first question is obviously that because of the new strain, do you see that the vaccine development also has to change to address that? How do you feel? First one, and secondly, how do you think this distribution will take in India? How long do you think at least most of the population in India would get vaccinated by? What sort of time frames would that be?
first part of the question is about vaccines development. So,
Correct.
as you suggested, various strains emerge, uh, the genetic surveillance will keep track of various strains which are evolving all over the world. And then any strain which is identified as a strain of importance will be sequenced. And once they are sequenced, they will try to incorporate those genomic compartments, because this mRNA, messenger RNA technology empowers us to create such varied related issues also.
Okay.
So we can tailor these mRNA components to address these things also. But as long as we understand how each strain differs from each other, how each strain differs in terms of transmissibility, how and what is that particular genome which is making this transmissibility to be increased, and why it becomes more pathogenic, why it causes a severe disease, or why it infects a certain group of people, because there was a talk about certain strain infecting more children, but that was not proved to be. But all these hypotheses needs to be tested in the field, and only then those inputs can be taken up by vaccine development agencies, and then they will work on it. We already have such a scenario with regards to our flu vaccine. The yearly flu vaccine that you get is not the flu vaccine that was operational the last year, because every year the flu vaccine goes through a similar scientific remodeling, if I can use that word, because they take into consideration the previous available strains, and then they add the particular strains which were of more frequently causing more disease in among the population, and they try to incorporate that into the current year flu vaccine. So such a model already exists with us. So that's the kind of scenario that I think will be of useful as we go along. That is one thing. Another thing is this time.
I can just interrupt in 1 second. Okay.
Yes,
now, what Mathan was saying is, see, the next year's vaccine is the composition of next year's vaccine is actually made up of a informed guess by scientists, by epidemiologists and people who are studying flu, thinking about what kind of variation will be there the next year and what will be the common strain which will happen next year. Now, to come back to one of my pet theories, this is the one place where artificial intelligence probably can play a role. You can play with big data. You can talk about how past few centuries of data that we have of flu, for past at least 100 years of data that we have on flu, we can think about what are the variations that have happened year on year. And you can predict next year's flu vaccine strain better than a human.
That is already happening, sir.
It's already happening, I know, but that is the only place where I can say, think of something positive to say about AI.
Yeah, okay. Artificial intelligence can enter radiology
Okay,
also.
we'll slip into next part of Madan's.
Which is about vaccine delivery within India. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So the entire plan of vaccine dissemination, the government has not openly communicated as of today. I think what they are going about it in the phase 1 of vaccine delivery is for the frontline workers. The number one priority seems to be for the healthcare workers, and then the frontline workers who have been a part of the pandemic response. And then they are trying to identify the next set of population who seems to be in the high risk category, the category of people who are in the higher age group and with comorbidities such as diabetic and hypertension. So that seems to be the process that they have in mind. And this alone, the first phase 1 alone, I think will take 8 to 10 months. That's a very conservative estimate that I'm doing. It may even go up to a year as of now.
Okay.
The initial cache of vaccines that have been delivered, that seems to be getting delivered as we speak from the Serum Institute manufacturing agency, is around 100 million vaccines. So if you think the logistics involved And if you think of
These
the,
are, again, Mathan mentioned whether these are what kind of delivery, how many doses?
so this will be 2 doses, which will be separated by at least 3 weeks.
Okay.
So that's the initial plan. And if you take Tamil
They're
Nadu alone,
injections.
yeah, they are injections. Yes, they are injections. And if you take Tamil Nadu alone, I think we will have around 1,000 vaccination sites to start with, and each vaccination site is planning to administer around 100 vaccinations per day.
Okay.
That seems to be the plan, because when you talk about vaccine administration, all these the entire logistics changes. It's not like drugs. First, there has to be a cold chain which needs to be maintained at a certain point, and from the
Just as an example, as an explanation to non-medical people, what is a cold chain?
the cold chain is the
No,
custody
see,
of vaccine.
I will give an I will
Yes.
just give. Sorry, before Madan goes into that,
No,
I will give you an example. Now, the Pfizer vaccine, which is what Trump was so excited about, which the Americans are so excited about, the Pfizer vaccine is supposed to be maintained. It's again an injectable vaccine, again to be given in a few weeks' time. I think 3 weeks interval, 2 doses. It is to be maintained at minus 70 degrees centigrades. The
Throughout.
vaccine to be throughout.
Throughout.
Probably for a few days, it can be kept at a refrigerated temperature of 2 degrees, or your regular fridge temperatures. But ideally, you're supposed to keep it at minus 70. So that is what cold chain is about, which I'm sure Madan will tell you better.
Is it possible in India to keep minus 70 everywhere?
No, our vaccine is not supposed to be kept at minus 70. So
That is why
he'll tell you about that.
That is why we went for this mRNA. Okay.
No, that is mRNA. That one
No,
is
no, all
mRNA.
is mRNA. Yeah.
Pfizer is mRNA.
Pfizer's vaccine and the Moderna vaccine demands that they need to be stored at sub-zero temperatures. So Moderna needs to be stored at minus 20 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
Pfizer needs to be stored somewhere between 40 to 60 degrees minus 40 to 60 degrees.
Okay.
So when I use the word cold chain, it involves the logistical transport of storage from the manufacturing end to the depot end, and then holding place where the vaccines are stored. So if you think it something like a paper distribution, from the print to the holding agent, it goes through a transport, and then it goes to a particular place in a town or in a city, and then from there people take it from their bicycles and distribute it to each and every household. So try to fix this a similar distribution model to a vaccination, where the entire thing has to be done in cold boxes, where the temperature has to be maintained in a certain range. For the vaccines that we are considering for distribution in our country, the range is supposed to be between 3 to 8 degrees Celsius. Okay. That is why I think that's the logic behind selecting these 2 vaccines. That is one part of the issue, and another part is the cost. Because the Pfizer vaccine seems to be costing around 2,000 rupees per injection, whereas the AstraZeneca or Oxford vaccine manufactured by Serum Institute is being sold to the government at a rate of 200 per piece. And when it actually, the Serum Institute director has gone on record and said that it will eventually be available in open market in 6 to 8 months. Until then, whatever they produce seems to be they are going to be delivering to the government through the public sector channels. So,
just quickly, Dr. Mathan, what is the difference between the Pfizer Moderna and what this Serum Institute is producing? For a layman, very quickly, can you tell in 2 sentences? What is the difference? What exactly?
The vaccine itself is like Pfizer and Moderna vaccines based on mRNA technology.
Okay.
Okay.
Whereas the Covishield, which is being manufactured by Serum Institute and developed
can I interrupt, Madan? You correct me if I'm wrong. I just try to put it in my terms. So how I understand. Your understanding is different from my understanding. Is almost like a layman.
Yeah.
See, your idea in vaccinating is to introduce the viral antigen. Antigen is something which will provoke an antibody response, provoke an immunity in your body.
Yes.
Okay, antigen is from the attacking side. Antibody is your defense side. So you are supposed to provoke a defense mechanism in your body by introducing a foreign object. Now you can do it in various mechanisms. Now the Pfizer mechanism is directly introducing. See, we already spoke about this virus as a RNA virus,
Yes.
ribonucleic acid virus. So so the ribonucleic acid virus, what happens? It comes into your body, it infects a cell, it replicates inside the cell, and it bursts open, and then it goes on. We talked about this exponential growth. So what the Pfizer vaccine and the Covaxin do is they take a part of this viral particle, the RNA particle, and they incorporate it into their vaccine. So when that comes into your body, it provokes something similar to a viral reaction. Okay, the protein reproduces inside your body. It provokes the antibody reaction, and their antibodies the same. One more thing that you can do is you can show only that particle which is presented to your body, like in this virus, the spike protein. So if you can reproduce the spike protein, and if you can introduce it into your body will react to the spike protein. So these are two of the basic mechanisms. You can either reproduce the virus particle itself inside, or it can be something like a dead viral particle. It may not be an active viral particle. It can be a dead viral particle. The dead viral particle will also provoke an antibody response in your body. Okay. Or it can be a weakened viral particle, which is what is happening with our oral polio vaccines. Oral polio vaccine is a oral drops which contain a weakened viral strain, which will provoke an antibody response. So from there, I think Mathan can.
Yeah. So if I can also just say, from what I heard is mRNA is like, to put it in engineering terms, mRNA seems to be the control system of the virus. So when you introduce that, our body's antibodies destroy that mRNA, and then when the next time the virus comes in, they go and destroy the mRNA, which sort of doesn't allow the virus to grow. Something like that is what I.
Let's put it another way, engineering terms only, civil engineering terms. The mRNA is the mason, okay, who's going to build the virus.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
And your body is going to attack the mason and prevent him from building the virus.
Building the house, yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Actually, that reminds me, there was a very, very old movie, maybe produced in 1960s, called Fantastic Voyage. They sent
where they reduce the humans into small size and reduce them into the human body.
Is it something like that? mRNA, just you put it, so it's duping the potential intruder.
No, you're doing a pseudo infection. You're actually doing a false infection. You're introducing an foreign object into your body and allowing it to replicate and allowing it to produce antibodies.
Yeah, Mathan, I think poor Mathan is thinking, why have these guys asked the question when they know the answers?
I think it's a data job easier. Because he explained it in a way which is more
user friendly.
I would have gone on to the technicalities. So that's the gist of it.
Okay.
Only thing which actually practically it differs from a user's perspective is the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine as a newer technology. That is one thing, and the delivering model for the newer vaccines as a logistical nightmare.
Okay.
Maintain them at that temperature in our country is a logistical nightmare. So we chose certain other vaccines, considering all these facts. That's the only thing that needs to be for a user or for someone who is going to take this vaccine. I think that's the right message.
So in other way, just to recap your answer for the earlier question, is that within this year, if you are not falling into one of those categories of health workers or really prone to the disease type of a person, the chances of you getting vaccinated through the government vaccine is almost close to nil.
Yeah, because 10 crore, 1 crore, 10 crore is maximum production. That's what
Correct.
Mother is telling. 10
if
crore vaccines
there
are able to dose, double
there are
dose.
two scenarios in which anybody can actually take a vaccine on demand.
Okay.
Right now, I'm just speculating right now, because the government has decided they are going to buy only 3 vaccines. The number one is Covishield from Serum Institute. Number 2 is Bharat Biotech, which is Covaxin, which is pending regulatory approval for mass vaccination. They have just approved it for a extended clinical trial mode because they want to take a larger sample size of only around 25,000 people, and that extended regulatory approval was granted to them last week. So that's the second vaccine. There's a third vaccine which is in the mix, which is the Russian vaccine, the Sputnik vaccine, which also is going through regulatory process right now. So the government is going to purchase a significant portion of all these 3 vaccines, and all these 3 vaccines will be available to us. But in the meantime, Serum Institute will actually directly come into the market and start selling this Covishield directly to consumers.
I see.
That is also a situation that
possibility
possible at a much higher cost.
Right, but that may happen only after 6 to 9 months, right?
Somewhere around 6. That's the kind of timeline that they are speaking about right now. After 6 to 8 months, after they deliver the entire cache of 100 million doses to the government, they will come directly to the market. They'll explore to sell through their own channels. That is first scenario. Second scenario is the Bharat Biotech or the Covaxin. They are going to deliver 55 million doses to the government at a rate, and then they are also going to come into the market.
I see.
And they may even try to export it to some other countries also. So all these scenarios are playing out as we speak. And there is another thing is the same Pfizer and Moderna vaccines also can go through. They actually can go through a regulatory process in our country, and they also will come into the market and start selling these vaccines directly to through their own established delivery channels.
Okay.
All sorts of scenario is possible.
Sure.
Now coming back to the question that Rajmohan forgot to ask, or asked, and we just glossed over it. Given that at least vaccination will cover the country in whatever form over the next 12 to 18 months or maybe 2 years, how long do you think this pandemic will last?
As I said earlier.
No. Okay, that's it. I mean, I wanted to ask next question.
We assume that we won't have a strain which has far more increased transmissibility, or far more increased pathogenesis.
Sure.
If things go as they are planned today, I think by 2022 we should not be in a pandemic mode. We should have gone ahead and what the WHO calls us as an interpandemic phase.
Okay.
Now,
but to be very honest, if you walk the roads of Bangalore today, we are already in that phase.
No, we are waiting. We are awaiting the next surge. Nobody seems to be worried about the new highly infective UK strain.
Correct.
What UK strain mean? What I'm trying to say is that now that we have a South African strain, even Dr. Fauci says we know very little about it. Only thing we know is higher transmissibility than UK variant. Only thing that we know. So given all this, do you think all these vaccines that we are going to distribute in 18 months, will they be efficacious, efficient against any other strain? Or they can immediately...
The possibility of all these strains going into all countries is something that we have to realistically look at.
No, I'm not saying it everywhere, but suppose 10 people get it also. But will it work against those strains?
No, see, in a different sense, let's forget about the strains. Let's talk about populations. I have listened to multiple, I've read and listened to multiple scientists talk about this. And there seems to be an actual divide among the scientific community about how the Southeast Asian population is encountering this virus and how the rest of the world is encountering this virus.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And the scientists themselves are not able to explain this.
Right.
Why the Taiwanese and the Japanese, I mean, the Japanese, Koreans, the Vietnamese, even Indians, Malaysians,
More than
we are not.
Indians, more than Indians, just think of Pakistanis and Bangladesh. Their fatality rates are much lesser than even ours.
That is because
And for all that we know, from what I read,
No.
their
From your laugh, I can say they're not. See, there is one thing that I agree with our friend Bruno on Twitter, Dr. Spine Surgeon, Dr. Bruno. He says it is not easy to hide deaths. See, there are people who are arguing with him online saying that India is hiding the actual problem.
No, I think
we are hiding the mortality rate. No, it is not possible to hide the.
Correct. I would say, see, if you look at it from a very anecdotal thing also, if you know 20 people who have got infected, right, you would have heard of one death, right? But 19 people would have recovered. If it was not so, if it was really in the US levels, right, we heard about our own people whom we know, their family, Indian family in New York got affected, and to get the body home, they took 20 days. The bodies, they couldn't, to get to the funeral, because the funeral home, cremation was not having place. So that sort of death rates you cannot hide. I think a 10-20% variation seems to be the norm. Everybody agrees in the death rate, at least.
What Vijay is telling Bruno, like that, we came across so-called scientific paper that the chewing tobacco. Okay, so myself and Pseudo Babinski, we floated a theory that any vaccine developed out of tobacco will be more efficient. And also the first news came was British tobacco. They are along with Oxford people, they developed this vaccine. So, that's another possibility.
Let's put things in perspective, sir. So, if you look at the routine human influenza season in UK or US, even the routine human influenza season, they have more mortality
Absolutely, yeah, right.
When we compare it to India. India also has a flu season. So for that matter, the entire Southeast Asia also has human influenza seasons. But the mortality is significantly higher in US and UK. That is why they take their annual flu vaccines seriously, and the entire mechanism for flu vaccine distribution is in place in those countries. So in that background, when you encounter a new virus, it is very natural that they are all vulnerable and susceptible population. And they are a significantly older population. And there is population who are prone to such viruses because their average level of innate immunity responses are hypothesized to be far at a lower level. So these are multiple theories which are floating around. As Vijay sir has rightly pointed out, these are all just theories. We are not able to put a finger on one particular thing and say this is the reason why such a drastic differences in mortality rates happens in UK or anywhere in Europe or US when compared to Southeast Asian.
And also another thing which we noticed, just looking at the numbers, is that the second wave has more number of cases, but the fatality rate seems to be much lesser in the second wave when you compare it to the first wave. When you see the number of cases that were discovered and the people who died, this seems to be much less.
That may be because we had a plan this time around. And we do. Now there are many ways. See, the awareness is there. Correct. People report early. People who used to wait until 10 days or 14 days after getting a disease, reporting has now significantly come down. And the knowledge and with the kind of research that has come out, we know exactly how people need to be managed.
Treated.
Certain part of
treated,
point
yes.
in the disease.
How to be? No, at the I mean, with the warning that you can cut me off and you can edit out this section at any time that you want, this particular for next few minutes, I will tell you one particular state of ours has worked this to their advantage. When they had a late spike, and then in that late spike, when they had less mortality, they said they are doing it better. No, they learned from the rest of the country. They did not control the virus initially. They had a late spike when the rest of the country, when the neighboring states had already controlled it, and they had a late spike, but they are having lesser mortality. They are being praised for it, for better management. Basically, they learned the lessons that we learned the hard way.
Yeah. No, I remember one in our office. We were running our projects in such a way that we never went into critical mode and all that. One project went into horribly critical mode, right? And somehow it got back to the state which was lesser than what we were dealing with. But they were given the prize because they came out of the critical mode to normal mode, right?
Yeah. Standing on giant shoulders. Standing on giant shoulders is what.
Yeah, standing on giant shoulder, or as somebody says, right? When the fire is small, you put it out, nobody praises you. You let the fire go and put it out.
Yes,
Yeah, I
Suresh,
think we are.
My fear is nobody will watch 2-hour video.
Correct. So let us cut it off before 2 hours.
Yeah, we're done. We have discussed most of what we wanted.
Yeah, I think we have discussed most of one. Rajmohan, this time you want to conclude?
No, you please go ahead.
Okay. So let me go ahead and conclude this. First, let me thank Dr. Mathan for giving us a very detailed explanation of all various aspects of the virus and about vaccines and about various virus strains and how vaccine delivery happens. And again, thanks to Dr. Vijay for all the interventions in between and ensuring that we cleared a lot of doubts. Plus, personal thanks from both me and Rajmohan for the nice words he said about us. So, what we have seen is that this pandemic, as Mathan has explained to us, is something which the WHO declares. It's not like you and I can call something a pandemic. A pandemic is defined in a certain way. It has a different process to be followed. Only if certain conditions are met, then it is called as a pandemic. And theoretically, all the countries have a pandemic response plan. Now, as Dr. Vijay had said, that they implement or not is up to them, because who cannot implement it? They can only suggest that pandemic, the guidelines, it's a guideline. And then we have seen that how the viral works. In this case, the virus is working on the respiratory tract. And Dr. Mathan explained about the spike protein, how it attaches to our body. And that in the multiplication of the virus, there are a lot of mutations that can happen. And some of these mutations are what we call as the new strains that are coming in. So vaccines have been developed, and this is, in this case, because of what was already planned for the pandemic by flu and others, the platform being built. This time, the vaccine development within a year has been a tremendous achievement. And as Mathan rightly pointed out, it's not like they started it as soon as they saw the pandemic. They have been doing this for quite a few years. And this point in time, that all that they did earlier has been beneficial, and on that platform they have gone ahead and built this virus. And the scientists will be observing the strains, and if there is a need, they will tweak the virus to ensure that the new strains are also addressed by the virus. And as he had mentioned, every time somebody gets influenza shot, what was the content of that shot last year, content shot this year would have varied to take care of the variation in the virus itself. And then the Indian distribution is supposed to start on Jan 16th. And first, we have the healthcare workers, frontline workers, and then the people who are susceptible to the virus, they will be given. And then possibly over a period of 6 to 8 months, we can see vaccines appear in the market. So till that time, I think all of us get vaccinated. It's always good to wear your mask wherever you go, or try not to go many places, wear your mask, be at home as much as possible, and then whenever you come in to the house, wash your hands and follow all the procedures that you've been following till now. Because we have a vaccine, therefore, as Mathan said, maybe by 2022, this could be an end in sight. But let's not behave as if we already are at the end of the pandemic. That's my thing. So with thanks once again to both the doctors here, Mathan and Dr. Vijay, let's conclude here. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks, Mathan. Thanks.
Happy Pongal, everyone.
Oh, happy Pongal, everyone. Yes.
But also, what you are saying is not for your city. Nobody is wearing mask in your city. Chennai, at least 10% are wearing. In the Bangalore, it's very horrible, actually. People have forgotten. Anyway, maybe Corona has disappeared from there. We don't know. Thank you, Mr. Doctor.
Right.
Nice talking to you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Rajmohan sir.
Thanks, Raj.
Thanks for this opportunity, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.